Having barking dog issues all of a sudden. Welcome, everybody. We'll let a few more people come through the waiting room here. Thanks for joining us.
Councilman?
Welcome, council members Neokas and Higley.
If a third one jumps on, let me know, and then I'll sign off so that we're clear with the
I'll let you know.
Matt's going to watch for that too.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I have all their names memorized for sure.
We'll just do a Rochambeau to see who.
Right.
There you go. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. And then I'm going to hand it off to Mark Thiemig in just a moment. But thank you for joining us here. This is our third of three, maybe more, but three for now. Zoom meetings where we entitled these Accessing Public Spaces for Your Business. And it's really not necessarily about do we close the street and do we open it up for tables and chairs, but that's certainly a possibility. Is it also things like parklets and parking spaces and alleyways and sidewalks? So we're here to listen. We've had some really good ideas and concepts kicked around the first two meetings. And Mark Thiemig with Community Services is going to kind of kick us off and frame this for us. And then we're going to go right into your comment section. So Mark.
So hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk a little bit about accessing the outdoors. Got a few short slides to show you some ideas on how things could potentially be structured. But really the intent is to listen to your comments and your suggestions and talk about the future. So on our Zoom call today, we have several city staff. We have Dave Kipp, who is currently the interim assistant city manager, will soon be the interim city manager. Larry Zimmer is on from our Public Works Department. He's our Public Works Director. We have Dave Jans from Recreation, and he's our Recreation Manager. Matt Mildy, Facilities and Events. Matt's involved in a lot of the downtown events and knows about street closures and things like that. And my name is Mark, and I'm the Community Services Director for the City of Healdsburg. So our goals in about an hour of conversation is to help you prepare for a more business-friendly phase of operations. We'll do that by sharing ideas and information. We'll talk a little bit about some ideas that we found. We'll listen to you. Then we'll take those ideas back and we'll evaluate them. There may be some working groups that come out of this, and we'll move into implementation. Things are changing quickly, so we want to try to move into implementation, really as soon as we can, safely. So the considerations that will go into that are obviously the overall framework of health orders, what can be done safely in terms of protecting your operations, your employees, and the public as well, and your customers. There'll be some zoning and regulations that we'll have to address, I'm sure, as we go through this. There may be some approvals that are needed by City Council. We'll have to obviously evaluate the feasibility. Some things just may not be feasible. Some may be super easy to do. And then cost, and what's it cost to implement. That'll be part of the considerations as well. So I'm going to walk through, let's talk a little bit about what are the options on the table. And basically, from the city's perspective, everything's on the table in terms of providing additional space and ways for you to function. Streets, sidewalks, alleyways, on-street parking, parking lots, Plaza and West Plaza, a roundabout, off-site facilities like Villa Chanticleer, the community center, and then there may be others that we haven't thought of. Some of the things that have come up about, like, well, what about private parking lots? And, those would be up to those private landowners, but certainly we could help facilitate that kind of conversation. So I'm just going to walk through 3 slides that show different ideas as a way to start the conversation and get you thinking. So the first slide is the use of sidewalks and street parking. There are 4 different examples here. The top left is use of a parking area. Same thing with the bottom 2, basically taking a parking area. The top right is more of a sidewalk sale kind of concept, so moving your wares out into the sidewalk area in the public realm. These 3 that are part of the sidewalk, some of these could be done on a more permanent basis, but there's also this really innovative program that happens throughout the United States. It hasn't happened in Healdsburg yet, and we were targeting it for this fall. Maybe we can still do it, but it's called Parking Day. It's where cities give up their on-street parking for businesses to create something that is both functional and artistic. It allows them to expand their physical space. It removes that vehicular element, and it really livens up the downtown area. So if you haven't heard of Parking Day before, I'd encourage you to Google it. You'll see a bunch of pictures on different ideas. Again, really blending arts along with functionality in utilizing space that typically isn't used other than parking. So use of sidewalks and street parking, this could be termed a longer term option for businesses to consider. The second is more of those temporary use of streets and parking lots. The top left picture was our Open Streets Festival that we held last year, kind of celebrating the completion of the roundabout, bringing people out on the streets. You can see one of the businesses brought their wares out actually into the street itself. It was fairly elaborate. It took a lot of resources and it was rather costly to put on, but that is an example of how streets can be used. The top right is a little bit more simpler. You'll see there are some booths out there, but they don't have the extent of those things. It's more opening the street for uses. People brought out plans to help liven it up. It can be really, really more simple, but yet still an inviting environment. Bottom left, again, a little bit more elaborate. They took a streetcar way and basically converted it. It's a little hard to see, but there are booths that go down the sides. And then the bottom right are what's happening now with Farmers Market, where they use parking lots, they extend their footprint so they maintain that separation so they can operate more safely. So this would be more kind of temporary, a weekend, a weekday kind of a situation. A longer term, along those same lines, are basically changing the street configuration. So these are different themes that show how a street could be repurposed. The top one, and these are a little hard to see, but we're going to get this information up on the website also. The top one is taking what would traditionally have been diagonal parking and changing it to parallel. You gain additional street frontage. The second one is where we essentially eliminate a lane of traffic and make it a one-way. The third one is a combination of that where it's still two-way, but parking is eliminated on both sides. And then the last theme, theme D, is a full street closure. So whether or not these work in Healdsburg is a discussion to have, but these are all options that we can consider as we go down this road of how do we ensure that people have the physical space to operate in. And the last area are using other open spaces, other public spaces, other public realms. The top left is obviously Healdsburg Plaza, has a significant amount of area. The likelihood of major special events happening this year is pretty low, so that opens that area up for other potential purposes. Same thing with the bottom left, West Plaza Park, between where the Bear Republic was located and where Hotel Healdsburg is. It's a fairly nice walkway. It's got nice tree coverage. That's an area that could potentially be repurposed temporary or long-term. Top right is the 3 North Street project. Eventually that will be an event center, farmers market, community pavilion, but it is available now for uses. And then the bottom right, we're working with the operator of Villa Chanticleer to talk about how that site could potentially be repurposed. Are there things that we could do there, since events won't go there for the near term, Like, could that be a place where there's staging of activities that need space? Could it be an offsite office for a large company? Because it does have a lot of physical real estate associated with it. So those are just examples of ideas. And I'm going to turn it back to Dave, who's going to kind of walk through some of the considerations and how facilitate the discussion.
Thanks, Mark. So we'll go now to your own comments and thoughts. This has worked fairly well in the past where folks have raised the blue hand under Zoom at the bottom of your screen, the chat section. The participant section. You can click on that, you can see your name and then hit the blue hand, and we'll see that as well. Let's see some other things to share. Folks may know that ABC, the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, has released some new guidance, which does allow, with special permits, the extension of alcohol service out past a traditional footprint of a business. So we're aware of that, and a lot of you are aware of that, and we've talked to the police department already to see if that can work, and they think it will. You have to be serving food at the time, and that your additional space needs to have some proximity to your regular space, including maybe, clearly an ability to use it. So with that, let me go to see if there's any blue hands up. We can also do the hand wave too, but the blue hands work a little bit better. Give a few more minutes. Is everybody figuring that out? So under participants, find your name, raise a blue hand.
I'll just add, if don't feel you have to come up with specific questions, even thoughts about what could potentially work for your specific storefront or retail location. It helps staff gather the information so that then they can bring it back to council. So just, feel free to, share your ideas and your thoughts on what could work for you and what concerns you might have.
Yeah, that's really a good lens to look at it. We want to know specifically for your business, your restaurant, your retail location, what would work the best for you and what would be a concern to you. Councilmember Neokis has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering if you could clarify the ABC rules with regard to the specific areas in the city that would actually be eligible for that, for expanding alcohol service. So, like, it sounds like perhaps the parking space in front of an existing licensee, but that's the extent of it. That's the extent of the distance.
It's a good question. If we as a city started to permit a space that was, say, in the parking space or spaces in front of your business, or if we closed half the street, we could add that to it as well. So it's really kind of up to us to figure out through a permit process what each space might be. And I do think my sense is from ABC is that they are really open to a lot of creativity right now, because everybody's
Right.
trying to help out sales and business.
Right, and this is maybe another question for Director Thimmig to answer as well. So during the Tuesdays in the Plaza, we explicitly allow alcohol consumption, beer and wine on the plaza for a set period of time, right? That's even under existing regulations, right? So it sounds like theoretically we could be very flexible with the interpretation of those restrictions. Yeah.
Well, I posted a link to the ABC regulations that came out. And if you click on that, it's the fourth notice of regulatory relief. And under 14, they have expansion of licensed footprint. And they kind of detail out what that means and, how it's controlled. And so there's a lot of the detail there. So that I think that's what we as a city would look at make sure that we're complying with, and how do we accommodate if now somebody can go out into a couple parking spots in front, then all right, what is it we need to do as a city to be able to accommodate that?
Yeah, so Councilor Neokis, that's a really good point you bring up. There would be certain times under the ABC rules where alcohol would be allowed to be brought out of the physical footprint of the building under this new rule. And then there are other times when the city has to waive its ordinances, or its ordinances actually, or its municipal code, to allow consumption of alcohol, for example, in public spaces like on roadways and things like that. So there are two different elements that go in. When there's the sale of alcohol that's involved, for example, at Dia de los Muertos, when we hold it and there's consumption of alcohol on roadways, not only do they have to have the city's authorization, but they have to have an ABC permit for that sale. With some of the changes that have happened with ABC, that they have to go through this one additional step, and then it's a temporary permit that's in place for a longer period of time.
Okay, I'm going to go to questions. Christina Stafford, please go ahead and unmute and go away. Go ahead. So far, we can't hear you, Christina.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, well, now we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for hosting not one, but three of these discussion groups. It's really, really appreciated. So I guess question number one, certainly I think, at least like for me, like I could definitely use some of the bump outs that are around my space. So there might be some discussion maybe around better usage of the bump outs that are all around downtown. And then, I like the idea of, say, closing down half of the street, because for businesses like ours, at least on Plaza Street, really very few of us have any kind of backdoor egress for accepting deliveries, or even having clients being able to come and pick up, right? Like if we're still limited in terms of to things like curbside, or if we get reduced back, then we need to have some kind of curb, so to speak. But so that's basically my thoughts currently.
Thank you. Good comments. Donna Del Rey.
Hi, everyone, and I echo the thank yous for putting this together and asking us all for input. My business, Relish, is a little different. We're a little bit restaurant and a lot of event management and event production. So I have food and wine, beverage issues, but also just overall event kind of production issues. So assuming corporate customers want to come back and do these events and travel and whatnot, which we've had a lot of our scheduled events for the fall say they now have corporate policies saying no offsite events, including companies like Salesforce.com. But assuming people want to come back and do events, it could be helpful for me to be able to do al fresco type events like on the Plaza Park, or possibly even in the Villa, not outdoor, or maybe even outdoor up at the Villa, in a way that would provide some distancing, and we'd have all the food handling issues we already have. But that could be of interest if I have client interest in that kind of thing. Could be actually really fun, just do a whole alfresco grilling experience. And then on the other side of that, with smaller events, is the possibility of me just setting up dining on the private parking lot that's right at the opening of where my space is, and allow the inside space to be for the cooking, dedicated to cooking. That separation would really be helpful for cleanup and a lot of other things. I think for people's feeling of security to not be dining where you're cooking and things like that, and allow us to spread out a lot inside and still have somewhere outside to go. So it's more of a private parking lot issue, but you know, there's still some things that apply in terms of alcohol licenses and stuff. So those are kind of the two things that come to mind for me in terms of, you know, potentially supporting business coming back.
Good thoughts. Yeah. Thanks.
So maybe if I could jump in here, Donna, I got your email. Thank you for sending that. If you are interested in exploring the idea of the villa, depending on what you know in terms of your kind of demands, definitely let's talk. I know we're actively working with Taman Group to explore creative reuse options for the villa, so it doesn't sit empty and it helps cover some of those carrying costs. So definitely that. And then one of the pieces too is that our intent with these with this process is to talk about sites and businesses citywide, not just in the downtown corridor. So you have a unique situation where you have a private parking lot. What would it take for you to do what you need to do aside from the negotiations directly with that private parking lot owner? So what do you need in terms of variances or things like that to make that happen? That's where we can come in and help. Other businesses that may not be in the downtown core, like in the Safeway parking or Safeway shopping center or up at Big John's or wherever, if there are things that those businesses need to function more efficiently and effectively, we're open to working on those as well. So it's not just focused to the downtown core.
That is good to know. And I don't know what I need. I don't know what I don't know. But it is food for thought, for sure. I mean, I have to say, one of the things, I was talking with Charles, who I see here, hi Charles, earlier today in our parking lot is, you know, there's just cost associated with any of this, right? Like, I gotta rent some tables, I gotta maybe get some umbrellas. I love the, you know, there's just the AstroTurf and just how it freshens up the look of asphalt. And, you know, how do you make this space look nice? And then I keep going back to, you know, I'm not making any money, but there's always costs. So, you know, well, I'll say thank you for the SBS loan at another time, but, you know, anything that can help offset. And even if I look at using a space like the Villa or Plaza Park, there's certainly fees associated with that. Clients who we would have hosted at Relish, now there's additional fees to host offsite. I mean, it just may not all pencil out, honestly, when all is said and done. But I think having this conversation is really important to at least explore the possibilities and then allow us each to do our own math and figure it out.
So Donna, that's a really good point that you bring up. I don't think the city's necessarily looking to charge fees for the use of these spaces, whether it be the plaza or West Plaza or things like that. If there are costs that are incurred as a result of, for example, barricades that are needed or whatever, there might be a fee associated with that. So those are all to be determined, but I don't let the question of whether you're going to be charged be a deterrent to exploring a really cool idea.
Okay. Good to know.
I'd emphasize that too. We will have to talk with the council about it, but all that the council has done so far has really been supportive of trying to be flexible and knowing that we're all in this together. We'll all succeed together. We'd all perish together. So yeah, think outside the box. You say, I need X, Y, and Z, and I can only pay for X.
Right.
We'll talk about that.
I'm also wondering if, you know, I don't know who else would be in the same situation I am, where it's not like I'm open every day for lunch or dinner. It's really by my schedule when the events are booked, and then I get my staff in and I get the chefs in and set up, breakdown, etc. But you know, the idea of having to rent umbrellas every time I do this, or I don't know, maybe there's a way to do like a shared thing with all the small businesses where I mean, I don't want to necessarily take business away from Encore events, but maybe there's a way to do a small upfront investment and we all share resources, folding tables and whatnot. I mean, all that stuff will nickel and dime you to death. So just some wacky ideas.
Well, I think we need to have a conversation with folks at the event companies because they're not having events either. So there's a lot of stuff sitting around. So, other comments?
Hello?
Charles? Is that...
Okay, you can hear me. Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, I mean, I'm losing money every single day. So the cost of buying tables and umbrellas and all this other kind of stuff, I mean, this is just, I'm just telling you, I haven't closed during any of this, right? But I mean, it takes 15 to run the store. If you're doing 5 or 1,000 a day, it just doesn't add up. So I'm just trying to figure out if you have to add the costs of all the other stuff, how can, I guess it's just as a group, I mean, it's got to be on everybody's mind. What's the cost of implementing going to the street and all the other type of stuff? There's just not a lot of cash.
Well, again, appreciate that point. Let me reiterate, this is something we're going to take to the city council. I would expect the city council to give a good, strong, active consideration to whether this should be a city effort that that assists the businesses. So obviously it can't be something we take up and take down all the time. Maybe it is, I don't know. But if
Right.
heavier infrastructure, a one-time setup, a one-time takedown, that's within the realm of the possible. And my
Right.
brain goes more towards something we've talked about in a couple of calls, that let's say the tables and chairs are set up, and how do we make sure they're kept clean and safe so that our visitors, your customers, will want to keep enjoying them. I posed that to my own family, and we're kind of talking about what would make a Healdsburg family with a couple of small kids want to come out for dinner again. And they're just really good care by the restaurants for the infrastructure that they're sitting in.
Yes. So I really appreciate that. Just so you understand it, because the numbers are the numbers, right? I mean, I guess I just wanted that to be part of the consideration, that, well, what does this really cost to implement, and the reality of it, and like you say, who's going to maintain, right? So anyway, sorry.
Good points.
No, those are good comments. There's a couple written comments for those people on the phone. Lucy Lewin says, since this doesn't totally affect my business, but definitely my guests, I'm for whatever will feel lively and keep our restaurants and shops in business. And then Jane says, hi Jane, says perhaps the shed could participate in some way. So there's a couple additional comments.
Can I throw in something else? Sorry, I'm not.
Go ahead, Don. That's fine.
Is there something that we as a business community can do related to your point about safety, Dave? Because I agree. I mean, people are going to have to feel really comfortable coming out, going into a store, going into a restaurant, and on everybody saying the same words around we're cleaning all the time and we're, following the checklist of things from the health department. Something we as a community or as a city can do beyond that. And I don't know. Might be, but throwing that.
I think our previous Zooms, we've talked about really good signage to say that, hey, in Healdsburg, we're following the rules. We want you to as well, and make sure everyone knows the rules and that everyone's good in a friendly way about following them, from businesses with their own employees and staff to the residents and visitors who would come and visit and come and partake in food and beverage or shop in retail. So we're working on those kinds of messaging right now, including sandwich board signs and so other social media messages. The physical logistics of it, though, is the thing I haven't quite wrapped my head around. Do we say everybody should bring their own container of Clorox wipes because that's the safest thing? I don't know. We're kicking that around today. I'm going to go next to Michelle. Michelle with her iPhone.
Hi, Michelle from Market 377, retail business, and we're just behind Mustache Cupcake, on Healdsburg Avenue. So I've got that great breezeway, and so I'm feeling pretty confident that maybe I could roll out some, carts for people to shop in the sidewalk sale type of situation that you guys mentioned. I think the biggest thing for me is if it's a full street closure, I share the same opinion as Christina, that it's difficult for folks who already say, I don't want to shop downtown, there's no parking, I personally love the idea of closing down streets and walking around. I think that's a really wonderful idea, but you know, to have retail still on curbside pickup and have no curb to pick up from makes it really difficult, especially, you know, being off the beaten path for me. And I think that a couple of other things that, you know, we're a small town, and with no tourism coming and no events coming, what I feel like we need to focus on more and more is those limited dollars that we have in our town to get people to come downtown, walk around, you know. So I like the idea of how do we make it appealing to people who are our neighbors, to remind them that, you know, we're all in this together. We're all, you know, these folks who live in our town, trying to keep our businesses open. You know, the hardest thing I think for me is the fixed cost of rent downtown. The fixed cost of rent downtown. So the landlords who are not given any breaks to the commercial real estate folks. I mean, there's no amount of, yeah. You know, I don't want to be like, you know, Miss Complainer, but that is our biggest fixed cost. And if there's no money coming in the door, they're not taking a hit for this at all. You know, and we're what make the feel of this town. And so I'm not really, you know, I see and love the creative ideas, but I'm not really seeing how we can make this all fun and fabulous for everybody. But then the small businesses still have to shoulder a good bit of this expense. So I don't know. I don't know. I just am feeling like maybe we need to have some focus groups based on industry, because I know my needs as a retailer are different from a restaurant's needs. You know, restaurants employ a lot more of our local folks and have a lot more of the, you know, self-certification and the cleaning things that need to happen. But maybe we have to have some little focus groups by industry so that we can really get a clear picture of what every business in town needs. That's all for now.
So Michelle is brilliantly jumping ahead, because that's one of the conclusions we reach at each meeting is we'd like to have 2 focus groups, retail and restaurant, to drill down on these ideas a little further. But really, really good comments there. I'm going to jump to Kathy Sagacio and then Councilmember Neokis. Kathy?
I think the business owners kind of jump in and help like the real estate owners.
Oh, wait, Charles. Just Kathy's trying to unmute there, I think, if you're still there with us. Kathy, you're still on mute. There you go.
Hi, guys. Again, thank you.
Okay, we can hear you.
Love the idea of the parking spaces, but kind of
You're a little quiet.
wondering about the use of sidewalks, and putting perhaps tables and chairs out on the sidewalk, which would block perhaps half of it. What is the feeling on the use of sidewalks for seating?
So I think generally some good thumbs up on that. Larry is going to comment a little bit about just making sure that ADA works while that's done, but that's definitely something that's a strong possibility. Larry?
Yes, we need a 4-foot walkway typically for anyone to get through. And you have to think about someone in a wheelchair so that there's equal access for everyone. So if the sidewalk is too narrow at your location, be able to set up whatever it is you're setting up and still keep the 4 feet. We need to start thinking about different ways to get pedestrians through, whether or not it's using the parking area or the street.
Okay.
So Larry, jumping in here, Kathy's husband. So if we just mock it up and get the table right up against the side of our building and just measure out 4 feet, that's our guidance. And if we don't have quite 4 feet, I mean, could we have a set of wooden blocks to essentially extend the sidewalk an extra 6 inches or a foot if that made the critical difference, or is that going to be shunned against?
Wooden blocks probably wouldn't work, but there would be other ways to extend the walkway that would be ADA compliant. You can't have uneven surfaces. Again, you got to keep thinking, so if a wheelchair were to go through, are they going to be able to make it unimpeded? But there are ways to do it.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm sure we could make that work. Any sense on where the meat company is? We have the one seating area, the bulb out. Any sense if ABC? I mean, if it's 20 feet away from us, or maybe I don't want to know the answer to that question, but is that? Does that sound logical that people could, if they're buying food from our place, have a glass of wine in that bulb out if it's 20 feet away? Or even that might that be too far?
No, I don't think that's too far. I know what we would do is work closely with ABC and with the police department to see how that could work. I think the mindset of ABC right now is really expansive. So we need to take advantage of that while they're thinking that way. So you bring up a good point, and that is if you did have a little sketch you wanted to put on a piece of paper and you wanted to email it to us, it's Matt's email address. He'll throw that up at the end. But we'd love to take a look at your idea and see how it could work. So it doesn't have to be well designed. It can be you and a pencil and a piece of paper.
Yeah, no, we're thinking we could get some seats. So that would be
Great.
good. Thank you.
And Dave, I'll share a sketch that someone did just so you can get an idea of some of the ideas that are out there. Let me share this really quick. This came from our last meeting where one of the participants said, well, gosh, could we look at a combination of one-way street closures throughout the downtown area? Here's North Street, then on to Center Street. Plaza Street would be a one-way, and then Matheson Street. So this is the kind of drawing that would be great to send to us for ideas. And again, Matt Mildy will be our recipient of all this, and we'll get his email up at the very end. And Dave, there's a couple more written comments I can read. First is from Emma Moore. She goes, hi y'all, I'm with curbside pickup for most local businesses. Would each business be able to get one allocated parking spot to continue our curbside pickup with this proposed street closure? That's one question. And then the second is from Mark McMullen, when we close or partially close downtown streets, we should advocate for downtown automobile parking at City Hall and the depot. Downtown should be considered primarily a pedestrian area. We should have convenient bike parking, even valet bike parking, close to closed streets. Encouraging bike and pedestrian access is important.
So actually, Councilmember Niokas, why don't you go, because you had your hand up again. I didn't want to go too far past you there.
Yeah, thank you. So two comments. First, I'd like to reiterate Dave's comment about being creative and letting yourself not limiting yourself to based on what you think are constraints, whether that be financial or legal or whatever. Right. I think some of the challenges that I've found being on the council is it's really hard to ideate up on the bench. Right. It's really we rely on this process, the gathering of creative ideas and the kind of generating of creative ideas at the local level from you guys to get the really for the best decisions to come, the best options to come up to our desk. So I couldn't agree more and emphasize more. Don't let your mind wander. Think big. On that front, I'd like to kind of add some kind of a provocative question. I sense, I get the concern from businesses about doing things like closing an entire street. Let's say Plaza, on the north side of Plaza Street, between Healdsburg and Center, right? Yeah, sure, it would cause some significant parking disruption, but on the other hand, it would also make a kind of a splash. Right, a PR kind of a splash. If we could say, hey, Healdsburg close off the entire street. Vilnius, as you know, hey, plug to Lithuanians, made a big splash by saying they're going to close all the streets. Could we have a splash by people will say have that visual connection? They'll say, oh yeah, the plaza, and the one street right next to it is completely open. There's an irrational excitement about that idea that maybe would generate more interest and more PR, and even frankly for residents to get more excited about the idea of having this extended plaza. So I want to throw that out there as kind of provocative what if, and see, I'd like to hear what if anybody has any thoughts on that.
As hands are being raised, I wanted to make sure we answered those, the comments that Mark read. We do think we need to promote outside parking, city hall parking, et cetera, to make sure that if indeed their parking was limited in the downtown area, that we were signing people to the right places. And then with curbside pickup, could we reserve one space? Possibly. The enforcement is a little bit of a challenge there, but let's just leave it at possibly. I know everything that I'm hearing too is that in-house retail is pretty close to us time-wise now. So, I could be wrong. We could always be surprised, but from what the governor said on yesterday, and what Dr. Mace said late last night, we should be thinking of a model where you can have customers in your store and not that far away as customers in your restaurant as well. So this is kind of think of it as a combination. And then this thought about closing the entire street, and just think about maybe we try it for 2 days or 1 day, and we don't put up the real big costly barricades, but we do a lighter barricading that Mark diagrammed out, and see if that, and give it a try and see what it's like. So all those things are on the table. Again, inviting your comments on that, your reactions to those.
Hi, can I be heard?
Go ahead, Charles.
Well, my concern with all this is, how will this be fair for all the different businesses? I mean, again, if you close off one street, that's going to be great for some businesses and maybe not for others. So I guess that's my concern with all of this. You can make a plan where, it's like a little, it's this great atmosphere in one street, and then everything kind of hovers around that. So how do we, people that are off the square, that's a concern. I mean, we get all caught up on one idea, and then, there's the periphery people that won't benefit from that. So I'm just trying to find what is the fairness for all the different businesses.
David Higley, did you want to have a comment on that one or something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we as a council have been looking at the city as a whole. Even this discussion, while a lot of it tends to be centered around the plaza, I don't think it's lost on any of us that one of the true attractions of Healdsburg is that we have a walkable downtown and a walkable city. So going back to, there's some comments about, hey, let's have everybody park at City Hall. We have some wayfinding signage that's going to be coming up. It was all part of the roundabout project. Those are things that we approved last year that's in the works to try to get, as people come in, they're not just circling the plaza from a parking standpoint where, it's not that far to park at City Hall and then walk into town. And the more that we can do, part of the reason we're looking at very different options between closing streets or half a street, or maybe like in the case of Journeyman, taking over a couple parking spots in front. I think that kind of the differences that each business and the uniqueness that they bring adds to the flavor of our town. And when you're looking at, having that flexibility going further north or going south, south of the roundabout and different things there, it really opens up and adds an additional expanded walkable downtown area versus you park on the plaza, you do a lap, and then maybe you go up one more block and come back. It's, I think the overall goal is a healthy downtown and a healthy city from border to border. And that's why this discussion, well, there may be some that seem like it's focused on one specific area. And Councilmember Neokas can confirm this, but our discussions have very much, our focus has been how do we expand that and help the businesses beyond just the plaza?
Dave, there's a few more written comments. The first from Holly. My friend lives in Hollister, and they are already doing this well. Would it make sense to see what they are doing since they are having some success? And I would say absolutely. We always want to steal the best ideas we can from other people and use our own too. Jim Hyde says, hi there. Something we looked at during the roundabout construction mitigation was a valet parking strategy. Let people pull into a central location and then have a valet take their car to a remote lot. It was relatively inexpensive to do on weekends. Also, what about making some branded Healdsburg white packs to give to visitors? Great idea. And James says, how will we monitor crowd control within the city? We don't want a Marina San Francisco district scenario. So 3 comments.
All good comments. I don't know that valet will be allowed too often. So I think that kind of model of where someone else gets in your car may not be permitted right away, understandably. But it's a good thought, though, just about how do we get cars in one location and people in another. And as to crowds, at least our thinking, and we could be wrong, is that the crowds will be pretty tiny, at least, and that'll last for a little while. And it would be a nice problem to have, I think, to have too many people, as long as everyone was behaving safely. And then we'd have to rethink that and kind of look at, kind of like a winery might, you'd have to start limiting crowds to the areas that are protected and breaking them up otherwise. When I say that, I think this sounds really odd, and I don't know if any of us wrapped our hands around how we'd manage this. So other comments or questions?
Hello, everyone. This is Ozzy. Can you guys hear me?
Hi, Ozzy. Go ahead.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for the conversation. Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to chime in a little bit about, as we're kind of like strategizing and, figuring out this infrastructure of, what the downtown corridor is or isn't going to look like, right? I just want to make sure we're also having the conversation about PPE messaging in terms of businesses and the downtown plaza area. And so I think from the last meeting I heard that there was some kind of creation of some messaging with the boards on the plaza that was really, really awesome and really cool. But I'm just kind of thinking kind of like, what does that space conversation look like as we're kind of strategizing with like infrastructure? Like what is, just a question. I'm not sure if that's been discussed yet.
So definitely conversations about sandwich boards and awareness of what the rules are. With regards more specifically to PPE, our going forward approach has been to assist to make sure businesses know what they should be doing with their own employees and their own customers.
Yeah.
And making sure that care is given. Did I miss your question, Ozzy? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I'm I'm just trying to say, for example, so like when I go to Trader Joe's, right? It's like if I'm standing in line for to go into the grocery store, there's typically like a little hand sanitizer outside of the business. And so I'm just wondering, because the plaza is surrounded by businesses, right? And I'm seeing the plaza just congregate with more and more people, which is good. I think people are coming out, they're enjoying the sun, but I just wonder if there's anything else that we could do in terms of like providing more kind of like public awareness around social distancing, because right now it's kind of like every business is having to kind of, there's obviously guidance coming from Dr. Mace, but also too, it's like, kind of what the conversation earlier was about is this, our resources are finite, right, as small businesses. So it's just like, is there a way where the city can also kind of, if we're inviting people back into our community, specifically, potentially tourists coming from the Bay Area, we want to make sure that they also feel safe in coming into our community by having, a sanitizer readily available on the plaza. I just think we kind of need to be thinking about like what that space looks like too, as we start kind of building the infrastructure around, you know, whether or not we close the streets. I feel like that's a conversation, right?
Yeah, and a great point. I know Mark's crew is pretty creative about working on different ways to set up hand sanitizers that don't walk away. So we do have to put our thinking caps on that. And I think the city's approach will always be, we'll be there to provide what we can in the public spaces, including knowledge of the rules and signage associated with the rules. And then to the extent we can, things that would be commonly needed, like hand sanitizers. But the next step then is what is more routine cleaning of facilities and infrastructure look like? That's a conversation we need to have with businesses as well as the council to see if there's resources that should go into that kind of routine cleaning that's different from what we do today. It's just a little hard.
And the only reason why I bring that up too is just because, you know, when you look at our population here in Healdsburg, like we have a lot of older folks in our community. And so, you know, it's like they're very, you know, I talk to them all the time and they're very risk averse. Like they are not wanting to go out whatsoever. Even if we create this cool infrastructure in the downtown corridor, great. But it's like there also needs to be, you know, we need to make sure that we have due diligence around safety too. And then like the visibility about what that looks like.
Well, absolutely. I think each one of us, family members and others, have told us the same thing. It's like, well, we need to protect Healdsburg residents first.
Totally.
And there should be a way to do that where the visitors comply and to embrace what the residents are already doing.
Dave, if I could jump in here and talk a little bit about signage. So we've been deploying signage throughout the park system. It seems like every week as the rules change and the orders change. We've got a system down. It's not the most attractive, but it's functional. I think and most of that's been paper. So when it rains, we redo it. I think as things become more consistent in terms of the orders, we'll be able to do something that's a little bit more attractive, a little bit more longer term, that helps get the message out and displays it, you know, visually as well as in text, those kinds of things. So we'll work on that, Ozzy, I think, as we move forward.
Other questions or comments? Again, use the blue hand, or if I can see you, you could raise your hand too. Christina Stafford, go ahead and unmute. Thanks.
Sure. I mean, I like the conversation around not just the people on the plaza, the businesses on the plaza, but citywide as well. But, you know, I just have to keep thinking about like Arena. They have their own delivery vehicle. They've got huge, heavy pieces of art, like way bigger than I do because their space can hold it. I just don't know. You know, I'm lucky because I've got at least Center Street on my flank that I could potentially get a delivery from, but I don't have a side door. I don't have a back door. So, you know, I like the idea of making a big splash, and I love walking everywhere. I'm always walking all over the place. But there is a surreal, just infrastructurally speaking, drawbacks to a total closure for the businesses that are on the plaza, which is probably where the closure would happen. You know, Chris has got to get her clothes in. There's the businesses that are upstairs at 105. You know, there's Duke's Common and Brass Rabbit on that street, and everything else is retail, basically. And everybody needs deliveries. And I don't think really anyone has a back door. So just to kind of highlight that, I love the idea of making a splash, but the logistics of getting a 500-pound bronze from a delivery truck, from a freight delivery truck, is hard to wrap my mind around how that would happen. So just a sort of a logistical thought there.
But continuing that thought, would a 1 day or a 2 day thing work, or a Friday, Saturday on a regular basis versus something that was a hard closure for a long period of time?
Well, I mean, I think potentially, or, you know, like mornings or something like that. But a lot of times, certainly with freight in particular, those guys are on their own schedule. So it's kind of hard to get a window there. With other things, it can be easier. You can set a window delivery with like UPS and FedEx. The mail also is a little bit tough to gauge. But I mean, possibly if there were some windows open, I'm sure that we could try to sort of work with that. There's just examples that I can definitely think of where that truck's coming across the country at its own rate of speed. And if you can't take that delivery, it's not landing.
Yeah, good point. But maybe something one way with half the street, that might be a better option for you. Yeah.
I mean, we've been experimenting with that with the farmers market on the other side of the street. And I mean, look, I'll take every inch of space I can get because I can always put more artwork out. So there's a benefit to me, but I also just see logistical complications on a very real way if the whole thing is shut down potentially.
Good, thank you.
The other piece that we could explore too is actual like loading zones where they're designated areas strategically in the downtown that are, you know, relatively close, but those are targeted, you know, only for loading and unloading of deliveries and supplies. You know, one of the questions I think that we'll have is, you know, the loss of parking in exchange for the benefit or the gains of additional space. If Larry's crew can sign it so people know where offsite parking is, concerns about that or the loss versus the benefit? Christina, you're probably on one of the most popular streets where, you know, parking is lost, right? So,
everyone wants to shut it down. I
so,
have to say, I mean, I promise you, the people who are driving from San Francisco, from our drive markets, from San Francisco, LA, Sacramento, Napa, they are not complaining about where to park. The most vociferous complaints come from our residents, come from our locals who won't come to the plaza because there's quote unquote no parking. So I'm sure if you've already driven 75, 100 miles, you know, parking your car and walking a couple of blocks isn't a big deal. I think that's a real, the real complaints that I hear are all long-term locals.
There's another comment, Dave, from Kathy Sagacio. As folks begin to travel to town for the day, I see them needing restrooms. Will the public restrooms be open? And that's a question. So part of the public restroom scenarios is that 2 of those are operated by the private sector. The one in the Swenson building on North Street is operated part of that building, and then the other public restroom in West Plaza is operated with Hotel Healdsburg. My assumption is that when those buildings open and they become more operational, that those will reopen. We have installed portable restrooms in the past. We do them every Tuesday night. That is always an option. Not the best, but it's always an option where people can go. And then we have the public restroom in the police department. So, you know, my assumption is more people come to town, we'll have to ensure that those resources are available. And Dave, we're running up against the hour. Just want to make sure everyone's aware so we don't run too far into people's other time or other Zooms.
Maybe a last call for comments or questions, and then Mark will tell us what's next. And blue hand if I can't see you, otherwise 3, 2, 1. Okay, Mark, you want to take it from here? Can't hear you.
Thanks. We just went over your ideas. We talked a little bit about what might work, what wouldn't work, what the concerns are, delivery, curbside, great ideas. So we are planning to, we'll take these ideas back. You know, we want to move on some of this quicker, so we don't get caught up in this huge process, right? but there may be a need, as somebody brought up, to bring together some working groups of similar businesses. I think we're a little concerned about just grouping similar businesses together because you guys are next to each other. So a restaurant next to a gallery, next to retail. We want to make sure we represent all those needs and come up with the best solution. But we're committed to doing that as well. There may be some approvals that are needed at City Council. We are hoping we can bring forward a set of different scenarios and options that Council can actually say, yeah, we like all of these except for this one. Implement them as you see fit. And so then we can move into the implementation stage. And I think the key thing here is that we're going to need to be flexible. And if something doesn't work, let's change it. So that communication back and forth between the city and the businesses and amongst yourselves is going to be very, very important as we move forward. So with that, your contact as we move forward is Matt Mildy. Again, he's our events and facilities supervisor. For those of you who can see the screen, his email's up there. Otherwise, if you're calling in, he sent the meeting invite out as well, the actual appointment. It's mmilde@cityofhealdsburg.org. Again, mmilde@cityofhealdsburg.org. We are going to build a web page on the city's website soon. I'm not sure if we started that yet, Matt, but maybe tomorrow or Thursday. So we'll get this presentation out there. We'll get all the recordings that we've heard. We're compiling the list of all the ideas. We'll get that up there as well. And then we'll figure out what the next step is. So Dave, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, unless, David, you went on mute. Do you want to make the last comment? David Higley?
Not necessarily last comment, but I do want to reiterate, when you look at the screen and the variety of City of Healdsburg staffers, the fact that, you know, two of the council members are on here, the more information that staff has, the better. So don't, like I said earlier, even if you think yours only applies to your specific business, don't discard that. Like Councilmember Neokos was saying, we want to hear the ideas. You're the ones on the ground. You know what works best for your business. Get the information, the ideas that work for you to staff, and they can kind of work through the various layers in the city bureaucracy so that it can then come to us and we can make a quick decision. So the more you can get to us, the better. And just a global thank you to everybody for participating.
I'll second that. We really appreciate it. Thanks for your time with us today. And we'll stay in touch. Okay, everybody take care. Stay safe out there.